So everyone knows the amount of people that use social media on a daily basis is a big number, but a lot of people don't realize how big that number is. According to Statista, 2.37 billion people across the world use social media. That's a crazy number when you consider the fact that most of the world's population is in the eligible range, but there's still portions of it that are too young or too old to use social media, or so we thought. According to a survey by the BBC, 85% of parents feel that children get negative influences from social media. But according to another survey by Know the Net, a nonprofit, they stated that 53% of children admitted to using Facebook under the age requirement of age 13. So we're presented with a little bit of a problem here. We've all acknowledged that social media is a negative influence, or at least 85% of parents have. Yet for some reason, we all continue to use it as a main source of news, of influence, as politics, and as a way of conducting discussion. What I present to you today is a really big problem in the status quo that we need to solve, a problem of influence. And today, we need to think about going on a diet of our media and a diet of our influences. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about today is how social media leads to irrational thought and in turn inaccurate news. So according to this Pew study, 62% of people get their news in some way, shape, or form on social media, whether it's a lot or a little. The problem here is that on social media, posts aren't promoted to be notable. At the end of the day, the loudest person is going to be on the top of your newsfeed, whether it's your loud uncle that complains to you at Thanksgiving or the New York Times. The problem is that social media doesn't discern for you whether the information is accurate. So what happens is you get this inaccurate information that you rely on as truth. A peer-reviewed study in the Journal of Royal Society studied the notion of using social media as a source of knowledge. They divided groups of 10 up into one group that was separately deciding brain teasers and one group that did it all together. Now, in that one group that did it together, there was a so-called expert that knew the answers beforehand. And essentially what happened is the other group got the answers correctly, but only because they copied the answers from the person who claimed to know more. They didn't say, hey, I'm associated with the study. They just said, hey, I'm really smart, I know the answers. So the idea here is that on social media, we're just copying the loudest voice. We're copying the person who says they know what they're talking about the most. There's no discernible way to predict accuracy here, which is a really big flaw in the status quo, because what's happening is when we get our political news, when we get any type of news on Facebook, on Twitter, on any sort of social media, it becomes very challenging to discern, okay, what's true and what's false. That study is compounded to talk about how the negative influences of social media lead to arguments like this. Yes, you can see on social media a lot of little children bickering and you think, oh, I'm better than that. But the same Pew study said that over half of Americans believe that political discussions on Facebook are more angry, less respectful, and less civil. And further, the BBC survey that I cited in the beginning of my speech stated that 25% of respondents reported having an issue in a real-life relationship because of a confrontation they had online. So here's what's happening. These kids that are under the age of 13 and adults are getting on social media and learning that the best way to solve their problems is like this. And that's a huge problem because we've become farther apart than ever and we don't realize that the other side is just as notable as us when it comes to the accuracy. So what do? We go on a diet of media influences. We're going to have to look into where our media is coming from. And I put this on the screen just to kind of show you how it's evolved over time. Everyone hears their parents say, don't believe everything you read on the internet. And then all of a sudden you got this little tweet right here, like, your crazy uncle's like, Hillary invented AIDS according to Freedom Eagle whatever. The whole point is that people don't realize that their sources of media are biased in one way, shape, or form or the other. So to solve the problem, we're going to need to start influencing our media. We're going to need to start consuming as much media as possible. So it is a diet, but it's a different kind of diet, obviously. You're going to be trying to consume as much as possible. So if you're reading the New York Times every day, that's great. You need to start reading other news sources. You need to start consulting other sides of opinions. And you need to start fact-checking your sources. I have PolitiFact on here just as a really small example of how you can look into other people's, what they're saying, whether it's in Congress or otherwise, and talk about what's important and, okay, is this accurate, is this inaccurate, is there scientific proof or quantitative analysis that proves some sort of the thing that they're saying. So the idea here is we need to take a stronger effort. Instead of cutting back on our media, we need to go forward. Now there are some peer-reviewed studies that back this up. A Yale peer-reviewed study stated that being a devil's advocate and diversifying your diet of thought, as the study put, leads to a more informed electorate and a more informed knowledge-based personality. So the idea here is that when you question the things that you read online, you're going to become a better and more knowledgeable, informed voter, and further, a more informed person when making decisions and talking about your opinions. Further, the same study warned to avoid something called a social media community because it leads to an echo chamber. The idea here is what an echo chamber is let's say we're all on Facebook, we all have the same opinion, and we all say the same basic fact. If you see it 7 or 8 times, you start to accept it as truth. And further, you start to stop questioning the idea of its accuracy or the idea that there's another opinion. So if you think you have it all figured out from your couch, you're a lot less likely to look out to the other side. So then when you hear the other side, you're like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. And you start hearing it for the first time way after you formulated your opinion. So you can diagnose 2 issues here, and that's where my solution comes into play. First, let's extend the amount of time it takes for us to formulate a decision. Let's learn a lot more about media, and further, let's take a little bit more time being the devil's advocate, questioning other people. And second, let's start to consider the other side as a viable alternative. And that kind of moves me to my action. Here, we're going to talk a lot about personal attacking and how it's kind of contributed to this bigger status quo. People are more afraid than ever to spout their opinions if they feel that other people will disagree with them. That's a totally awful thing. And I think part of the problem is that people are worried that they're just going to be attacked. You'll get labeled a racist, a misogynist, a communist, an ist, a person. And the idea here is that when you assign blame to someone and blame them personally, and you say, the reason you believe this is because you're a blank, we're creating these ad hominem attacks that lead to a scenario in which people can't talk about their beliefs. And that's a really big problem. John Oliver, a news host for a satirical liberal news show, even said, our news is micro-targeted. The last thing I'm going to finish with you today is, I know it's a little playful, but I'm going to finish with a Tupac quote from 1996, just before he died. In the song Changes, he said, we've got to start making changes. Learn to see me as a brother instead of 2 different strangers. The idea here is that in the 90s, we're having issues with how far apart we are. Now with social media, we're farther than ever. We need to start seeing the other side as humans, which is what they are, and seeing their opinions as just as weighted as ours. And when we do that, we'll be able to come together more fully as a society and be able to solve a lot more issues in society. Thank you. And if you have any questions.